how you determine what to do with your left hand?
Yes, a lot of it depends on the style of the song. Like if it's a good 4/4 time song like Power in the Blood, then my left hand is going to be doing something different than if it's a slow song. Hold on, I've got a little visitor. So like on that song, like Power in the Blood, it might be like, so I'm just keeping it in octaves. This is like congregational, not just like arrangement. Okay, but if I'm doing a song like, I don't know, At Calvary, then I may have more of like an octave chord pattern going on my left hand because it's a very upbeat song and it's that 4/4 timing, so here's. So I keep it nice and smooth with octave chord, with some octave fill-ins, like that. You want to do as much connecting with octaves as you can instead of just doing octave chord. Like scaled runs where like, okay, but then you can also do something called outlining the chord, whereas if I want a C chord, my 3 notes are C, E, G, so then I could go, so I'm on a G chord right there in the chorus, so I'm going to do G, B, D, G. Slower song like an invitation or like a big song like Be Still My Soul that I played at the beginning, I'm going to be doing more of a rolling pattern with my left hand based off the notes on the chord. So if I'm in the key of C, like, or let's do I Surrender All in D. For an invitation, you'll take the notes of the chord and you'll do 1, 5, 3 or 1, 5, 1, 2, 3. And where I get those numbers from are the number that's in the scale. So like if I'm on a D scale, D is 1, A is 5, D would be 1 again, E is 2, F sharp is 3. So it'd be like this. And you can vary the speed. So E is the 1, B is the 5, 1, 2, 3, based on an E minor scale. That right there is just harmonizing my, like my melody. So I'm kind of like adding an alto line in my left hand. Hope that helps.
Tips on chord substitution?
Well, a lot of times you can use the 2 minor in place of the 5 because the 2 minor always leads to the 5. So like, I Surrender All is a great example of that. Like, you can go straight to the 5, or you can go to the 2 minor before the 5, like this. 2 minor. Okay, now instead of going back to the 1, which would work, I could go. Real easy. What would be prettier is to go use your 3, which is F sharp major, and you go to B minor. That's a G minor over an A in my bass instead of just going. I've got 3 beats, so fill it up with a pretty chord. Another good, easy one to do a lot of chord substitutions is 'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus. It's written in A flat. This is the basic chords. Okay, well, a couple things you could do. You could go B flat minor, F minor, B major. B minor, B flat minor, E, F minor. The chorus has a lot. It's written like this. Okay, well there's a lot we can do with that. We can go F minor, B flat minor, E flat major, F minor, C minor, B flat major, E flat major, F minor again, then A flat 7. The thing about chord substitutions is it's got to make sense, and it requires more ear than just like reading what's on the hymn book. I'm trying to think of an easy way to explain chord substitutions. I'll have to work on that.
What are some good warm-ups?
Scales, 2 and 3 octaves. Like Alfred has a really good scale book. It's called The Complete Book of Scales, Chords, Cadences, and Arpeggios that I really, really recommend. It's fantastic. And also, like, you can warm up with chord drills. No, I'm thinking like warm up before a practice session, not just before church. I don't warm up before church. My prelude is the warm up. But like getting comfortable with arpeggios to loosen up your fingers. Like Sunday morning, my prelude had just to have a lot of big chords in it because my fingers were super cold because it was just freezing outside. So like practicing, a lot of big chords, stretching your fingers, that kind of thing. Playing with warm fingers is better than trying to play with cold. I know that.
Is it easier to read notes or play by ear?
Both. I think I could just about read notes before I could read words, so that it's interchangeable. I like to play by ear. I like the challenge, but it's also good for me to still read a lot of music, and I do mainly because I still teach music. But both are very, very valuable. Like, I think it's important if you only play by ear that you learn to read music, and if you only read music that you develop an ear by trying to play what you hear.
Can you show upward runs you do in between verses or such?
Yeah. Let's do There Is a Fountain. So that right there, I'm on the 2 minor going to the 5. So I use a D minor arpeggio. And what I do is I go, that's the 4 notes of a D minor chord. And I double that top note, so I would go like that. So that's another upward run. It's not an arpeggio, it's scaled, meaning every note in sequence. Okay, what that was, I'm on a C chord and I'm staying on a C chord. So I use a G, a C, a D, and a G. That's like a suspended C chord. There's the C chord. So I use the D instead, just because it sounds prettier is the only reason, okay? So I'll go. Okay, that. I'm on a C7 chord. You can add the B flat if you want. As long as you have it in your left hand somewhere. The 1-7 always leads to the 4. In this case I'm going to the F chord. So then I can plug that in my arpeggio, or I don't have to. I can do that. And it sounds nice. The 7th leads you to the 4. Like that.
How do you select the right chords? Like, are there any go-to chords you use?
Generally you follow the hymnal. But like adding a 1-7, which leads to your 4, that's not necessarily always going to be written in the hymnal, so I may add that at times. Your 6 minor. I don't know. Are there any go-to chords? Generally stick to what the person who wrote the song wanted. So in the hymnal, that try to stick with what you're doing, especially if you're playing with an orchestra. Like near the cross, 3 different hymnals will have it written 3 different ways. So like, okay, that's one way it could be written, or it may be written. Oh wait. Where they stay on the B flat instead of adding the D minor. You won't usually see the 1-7 leading to the 6 minor. That doesn't really sound good. So sometimes you'll just see it. Then go to the 6 minor. Then go to the 4. So like if it's written that one way in your hymnal, try to stick with that, especially if you're playing with an organist or not. If you're just doing an offertory or like a special, add whatever chords you want to use. So as long as it sounds good and they connect, you know, like the 2 minor never goes right back to the 1. Like it always needs to go to the 5 before you go back to the 1, stuff like that.
How do you perfect that octave chord bass? I can't ever get my hand from the octave to the chord fast enough.
If it's in 4/4 timing, beat 1 is an octave, beat 2 is a chord, beat 3 is an octave, and beat 4 is a chord. So practice it slowly.
She said, where do you find your music, or do you always play by ear?
Both. I don't always play by ears, but like a lot of our church music would be by ear, and so I would listen to the original people do it, whoever that would be, and then practice it that way.
How do you improvise left hand with hymns like I Know Whom I Have Believed?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do it and show you.
Well, it says I know who I have beloved, but I think it's believed.
Yeah. So I'm doing a fair amount of octave chord along with chords in my left hand. Sometimes my left hand is going to almost play like a little bit of melody with the right hand, and that works. You can go. Now, this is not a chord that's in the hymnal. I'm going to the 4, so I'm going to do the 1-7 with a, like I'm in the key of E flat. Go ahead and plug a D flat chord in your right hand, and it'll lead you up to the A flat chord, which sounds really, really cool. So that was a lot of octave left hand. Kind of like a harmony with the right hand. Show it, then explain it.
Can you talk about introductions and accompanying specials?
Yeah, introductions you want to generally do. There's 2 lines of thinking on this. You can do the end of the chorus. What I like to do a lot of times is the beginning of the verse, like just a few words of it, and then the end of the chorus. For example, I'm trying to think of one I haven't done. You can know 100 hymns and then forget them all when you're trying to think like this. How Firm a Foundation. So he says the page number. I immediately start the intro by going, and then I do the end of the verse. And it kind of leads it into it. Now that one's easy because I think the end of the verse is actually really similar to the beginning of the verse, which is fine. But I generally start off with a little bit of the beginning and then go into that. You know, I want to know more about my Lord. I would start off with, and then the end of the chorus.
Can you play?
Accompanying specials. Not much melody and keep it down. Like, keep it really light. Don't play a lot of melody. They're singing, so that's the most important part. You want to just kind of like be in the background. Like Field of Grace, I was working with somebody on that. The girl's singing the melody, so I'm just kind of... If you know the song, you can tell where she's... So I'm not really... She's doing the melody. Have an audience. If that makes sense. So it's just very little, not a lot of melody.
Could you play the same song in different types and tell them which style it is?
Oh,
Little game.
tell them which type it is?
Yeah, no.
Well, like if it's a congregational song, I'm going to play that very differently than I do an invitation. You know, we did My Faith Is Found a Resting Place for invitation. I'm not going to be playing... That's fine for congregationals. Big 4-note chords in your right hand, octaves in your left hand, but if I were doing that for an invitation, I would keep it down. Very small. In most invitations, people are praying, so you don't want to be playing very loud. Hope that helps. It depends on the mood and the time that you're playing it. If it's an offertory, you can be a little more showy. You don't have to focus so much on just keeping the nice tempo regulated. You can do different things on different verses. You can add key changes, whatever you want to do for an offertory, especially if you're playing by yourself.
Can you play Since I Have Been Redeemed in F major?
Sure.
Make up notes as you go, or do you have a pattern depending on the timing?
There is a little bit of a pattern depending on the timing. Like Blessed Assurance is, I think it's 12/8, and so that has a different feel. It has a totally different feel than 4/4. So what I do on a 12/8 song will be different than on a 4/4 song. But I suppose there ends up being a pattern after you play a song, you know, for several years. You kind of end up doing some things the same way. So like Blessed Assurance, I don't have as much going on in my left hand as far as like chords. It might be more like... So the feel is different and the pattern is different. Southern Gospel, the dearest friend I've ever had, or something, you know. So my left hand is completely... Like in a lot of those songs, I end up kind of like putting a little offbeat in my right hand. So like that. So yeah, they're different.
For congregational hymn playing, do you play strictly the notes from the hymnal or improvise as well?
I improvise as well. Like at Calvary, or let's pick a different one. If I had my hymnal out, I could think of more songs. Nothing But the Blood. This is how it's written. Okay, that's the 4 notes. The hymnal was written for the congregation, not for the pianist. It was written for soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So that's the only 4 notes that are written, right? Well, the pianist, you have a lot more freedom. So first thing is you want to octave your bass, octave your melody, and put the alto and the tenor note within your right hand. So already we went from 2. So you went from 4 notes to 6, and it makes it sound more full, and you can move it down if you want. From there, you want to start looking at connecting fill-ins like this. Right hand, or chords in your left hand. So this is not what's written in the hymnal. Your job is to play full with authority and to call people's minds to think about the words more strongly. So whatever you can do to make that happen, do it.
How do you recommend practicing scales?
Start very slowly. So let's take G. Okay, so I start really, really slow, and then as you can play it perfectly at that speed, like use a metronome. A metronome is like a rhythm clicker. There's a free app. The Steinway metronome app is free on an iPhone. And you start really slowly, like 66 or 70, and then as you can play them perfectly at that speed, you gradually increase it until you can play them at 120 at a quarter note speed. So slowly and then progress.
Any tips for transposing to different key changes within songs? C to D is the only one I can easily do.
Okay, you can go from any key to another key with this little formula. If I'm going from D to E flat, E flat is the new key. You can go to any key by doing the 2 minor, then the 5 major of the new key, and then you'll be ready for the new key. So if I'm in D and I'm going to E flat, okay, E flat is my 1, so that means F minor is my 2, B flat major 7 would be my 5, right? So if I'm going from D to E flat, I can go. And it works for every key. Let's go from A flat to C. So if my new key is C, what's the 2 minor? It'd be D. What's the 5 major? G. So let's try it. We're going to go A flat to a D minor, then G, and then we'll be ready for C. Let's see if it works. And there I am in C. So you do the 2 minor and the 5 major of the new key, and then you're ready for the 1. And that works for every single key change you could possibly do. 2 minor to 5 major, then the 1 of the new key.
What is the main hymnal you use?
This right here, thank you. The Rejoice hymnal. It's my favorite. I also like the church hymnal, like the red back church hymnal. It's actually a Church of God hymnal. It's written in the shape note style, so it's got a lot of old convention songs like Stamps Baxter type thing. I'm winging my way back home, those. And those are a lot of fun to sing, but most congregations don't know shape note singing anymore. And I like the Rejoice hymnal because it includes a lot of gospel songs, and it comes in a shape note edition. This one happens to be a shape note edition. I'm not sure if ours at church is shape notes, but it's got all the old hymns you could possibly want, as well as gospel songs up to about like 2,000. So I like it a whole lot. I think it's got 728, including the amens. So soul stirring hymns, whatever that was called, that's a great hymnal. Majesty hymnal is excellent, produced by Majesty Music in Greenville. Theirs is great. Those are my favorites.
Tips for playing in keys like B and F sharp.
practice them until they're as easy to play in as the key of C. A very great pianist named Otis Forrest, he used to record for a lot of like Southern gospel groups. He told me that one time. I didn't know it was him, and our youth choir sang at a church where he was playing the congregationals, and he sat behind me when I played, and afterwards was giving me some tips. And I asked him if he played in those sharps, and he said he could play in B as easily as C. And so I went home and practiced every song I knew in the key of B, and I would practice Amazing Grace. Until it was easy as playing it in G. So.
What are your practice resources you would recommend for learning to sight read better?
Sight reading easier music. You can find like dollar bins at your local music store. A lot of music is available for free online, and you can print it off and practice it. The more music you read, the better you become a sight reader. Find collection, Disney song collection, Reader's Digest top 50 from certain decades. They did a collection like that, and I used to sight read a bunch of that stuff because the rhythms were kind of hard. And old movie theme songs like Rodgers and Hammerstein, that kind of stuff is really good for building sight reading skills pertaining to rhythm.
This person finds themselves doing the same fill-in over and over. What are your tips for finding new ones?
Listen to other pianists. I hope you're learning something from this, but watching other clips like this, and the more you listen to and then try to implement that into your own playing in your practice time, to where it's so easy that when you get in church and you get nervous, you can still do it and it won't rattle you.
There's some people saying they've learned a lot from you since they've been following your page. This one says, what advice would you give to a pianist that is learning to play for a youth choir at church? They play by ear.
If it's a new youth choir, like they're all still learning, you want to have a little more melody, like be playing a lot of melody, because that gives the choir a lot of confidence. Play with authority. Do not play quietly and just kind of like barely touch it because you're nervous. Like, practice the song so confidently at home that when you get in front of everybody, you can play with authority and you don't have to be afraid of it. That's the biggest thing I see, is a lot of churches would sing out more if the pianist would play with authority. So you have a lot to do with how much confidence the choir or the congregation has by the way you play. So dominate that thing. Play.
What are the best pianists you would recommend to listen to or watch for playing by ear for your church congregations?
Kim Collingsworth is my very favorite. I think she has a beautiful style, and she's my very favorite. If you go to YouTube and type in Southern Gospel Piano, there's a guy at Lancaster Baptist Church out in Lancaster, California, West Coast Bible College. They've got a really great church pianist, and they put a lot of their videos on YouTube, and I really recommend him too. I'm afraid I don't know his name, Daniel something or other. But he's really great, and he does a lot of his own arrangements. Greg Howlett, Howlett, has a YouTube series and a bunch of YouTube videos where he does tutorials as well. I think he has a DVD series you can purchase along with like books of his arrangements, and he's a really good church pianist.
What are your tips for playing songs like A Mighty Fortress Is Our God and songs like that that don't have consistent bass, note, or chord?
Follow the hymnal. And a lot of times for a song like that, like, here, let me do a verse of it for you. You'll see what I mean here. You're octaving the bass and putting the chord in your right hand for a song like that, because you can't have an octave chord. Hold on.
Someone said, is it Daniel Hopkins?
Yes, that's it. Hopkins. I was afraid to guess at his last name. That's it. He's excellent. Okay, A Mighty Fortress. Let's see here. I'm going to octave my bass, put my chord in my right hand. you'll just play with authority, octave the bass. You've got a couple times where there's a dotted half note, several times right in here. Half note, 2 half notes, 4 dotted half notes, and then at the end, that's your time to do something big. But overall, the congregation needs to be thinking about the words anyway. There's a whole lot of words in there, so don't do too much. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you learned something.